Hey.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Alan Firstenberg.
And I'm Noble Ackerson.
And we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
So, live from Voice in AI 2024. Thank you everyone for being here today. So for those of you that, how many of you have heard of Two Voice Devs before coming into this room? A couple of you. Yeah. So we are a podcast. We've been going on for just over 4 years now. We started life talking about developing for voice systems like Alexa and Google Assistant. And like the rest of the world, we have moved on to including that, but also including systems like how do we do these sorts of things with large language models. So normally on the show, we address things from a developer point of view. At these live shows, and this I believe is our third or fourth live show now, we take audience questions. During our regular podcast, I have a usual co-host named Mark Tucker who couldn't be here tonight. We also like bringing in a lot of additional guest hosts, and Noble Ackerson has been a frequent guest host and has agreed to join us today. So, why don't you introduce yourself and say a bit about yourself?
Hey, yeah, I'm a former developer turned product manager turned AI strategist, I guess. And I've been doing a lot of sort of education on implementing some of these tools that we now know to be ubiquitous responsibly. And so you can find some of my work on Udacity. I am an instructor for the AI product management course. I'm a builder and implementer as well, so my GitHub is often lively with some weird stuff that we may get into today. And yeah, try to push the boundaries of all tech. Alan and I have known each other for a very long time at this point, around the time where that thing on his face, the face computer, was first launched. We happened to be two individuals that were invited, remind me here, to New York.
So we were invited to a hackathon that Google ran for their Google Glass launch. Before they launched it, it was called the Glass Foundry event. We were two of 100 people at the New York event, and having never known each other before, we somehow sat next to each other while we were developing our separate projects. And over time, over the day, we started kind of just brainstorming ideas off of each other and shooting ideas for where we saw this platform going. And since then, we have collaborated on a couple of things. We have brainstormed separately and together on a couple of things. Those of you in the hall, come on in. You're welcome. And what we have found, I think, over the years is that we bring very, very different perspectives to the technology that we work with. But we kind of have a very common goal of wanting to help others use this technology and use this technology better. So what I think we would like to hear, leave the doors open, it's fine. What I think we would like to hear is we want to take your questions. We want to hear what you think about the show, questions you may have from stuff you may have heard of this morning, or questions that you may have that you're hoping get answered at some point in general. And we like to answer questions, and if we don't know the answers, we'll discuss what we see. So we've got about half an hour at this, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. But let me start with a question for you, Noble. What are the things you've seen so far this morning that you've liked? And I know you did a presentation earlier. Mm-hmm. Can you summarize a little bit about what it was about in just a couple of minutes? We will have you. We're going to have you on the show talking about the presentation later, but kind of give us a teaser for what it was about.
So that was a two-parter. The most interesting novel thing that I've seen so far at this conference was a presentation by an organization called PEAT, which is, I don't even know what the acronym means, but they're part of the Department of Labor, and it was about inclusive hiring with AI and some of these systems that we use to hire, fire, promote individuals, and some guidelines that that organization put together to protect you and I when we apply for roles. So I found that very interesting, and I'd love to talk to those people a little bit more. What I talked about, it was actually an interactive workshop. I've been on a tear for the last 7 or so years about responsible AI, and one of the key pillars of responsible AI is interpretable models, or at least explainable models. And we don't have that luxury anymore with deep neural networks or generative AI. And so what I talked about was how to get a level of understanding and explainability using source attribution and other techniques to help build trust with government services in their use of generative AI when they build apps. So that's sort of the natural. I'll just leave it at that abstraction level, but we can get into some other things. But we're, again, as Alan said, more interested in what you've learned and any questions, things that are, still just ruminating in your head, you just don't fully understand, or you just want to sort of debate someone. If I don't have the answer, I will ChatGPT it. I'll give you a very opinionated answer.
Very opinionated answer. Very opinionated answer. So the other thing I do want to point out is we approach things from a technical point of view. We are, at our heart, developers, but we also are very, very aware of all of the other issues that surround it. So we're aware of the ethical questions that are tied to it. We're aware of the design questions that are tied to it, the policy questions that are tied to it. Both of us have been doing this sort of stuff for years now. So while we bring to it a developer's perspective, we've got all of these other things that we can answer from a developer's perspective. And that's kind of where the podcast as a whole likes to bring things. So what questions do you have? Anyone? Yeah.
I'm just curious if you guys are worried about AI and DevAI becoming more of a threat to what you do.
So are we worried about AI and DevAI impacting us as developers? Is that the question?
That's it.
That's a great question. Can I start with that? Sure.
Could I ask, what's DevAI, if you could?
Okay, good. So DevAI is, at least the way I see it, is the approach of using AI tools in developing software.
That's what you meant.
Yes.
Is that, so that's kind of the, what might, the GitHub Copilot, for example, would be one example of that. Google has their Google Code Assist. Everybody's got something. What's the big one that's out? Cursor?
Cursor.
Cursor is a big tool for these things. So I have 2 thoughts on this. My first thought kind of boils down to, I'm concerned about them a lot. And not because I'm worried about my job. It's because at some point we are going to need more developers. We need developers to build these things. We need developers to put inputs into these models. And that's fine. And traditionally, as a developer, we would assign that to a junior developer. The problem is those easy things that junior developers used to be able to do are slowly being nudged by these tools. So these tools can now do stuff that, say, a freshman or a sophomore in college learning how to develop software. It can do that level of software development. It's edging into where the junior developer, the brand new hire, the summer intern, I don't need them to do this stuff anymore because the AI can, at least in theory, generate some of that code. I don't think it will ever get to the point where it can generate the code that a senior developer can do. The problem is the only way to get a senior developer is to start them as a junior developer.
Right.
And if we're not starting junior developers as junior developers, if we're not letting them make the mistakes, learn the lessons, learn how to do software better and better, then we're kind of jeopardizing the software development industry in a way that AI cannot replace. So that's my concern, that's my worry. On a personal level, I don't use these tools. And the reason why I don't use these tools is right now they produce garbage. The output of these code assistant tools does not help me and hinders me. And I know lots of developers that love them and use them. Great, I'm glad they do. But for me, it doesn't help at all.
I actually agree that for me, it's an enabler versus a threat, as you put it. I'm a technical product person. Code is but a piece of what I do. I would argue that for a senior developer, the ability to code is also kind of that's the least important part of the process. How you talk to users and understand whether you're building the right product or the product right, depending on your stage, matters more than slinging 20 lines of import statements. So with that, I think I'm gonna, I can't remember who to attribute this quote to, but it stuck with me, and I'm gonna butcher it. Someone smarter than me said that generative AI, at least for developers, lowers the floor, allowing junior developers or people from non-technical backgrounds to actually provide context or actual code, rather. And it raises the ceiling for senior developers or architects who may want to augment some of the boilerplate, some of the things that they just ask me how many times I've pushed to GitHub and ask me the command to rebase. I have no idea. I have to Google it every single time. Or just, what's my pipeline what's my folder structure for this React thing, and I don't want to use a sort of a canned thing. I can build myself a scaffold and just command line start, and I have my own start React app, but for me, right, as a senior dev. And so, the code often to build products consistently and ship quality code more often, the code part is minimal. And even with AI, I want to inject an opinionated statement here.
Because we're never opinionated.
Of course not.
Never.
The model is the model is maybe 13 to 15% of getting a user to actually consume and actually benefit from the solution the problem that you're looking to solve for that end user, right? Google famously, back in 2017, released a white paper called Hidden Tech Debt of Machine Learning Systems. And they had, I wish I could pull it up, but it's basically like a diagram, and there's a dot in the middle with a bunch of boxes. The dot in the middle was the machine learning model. The larger boxes around that dot was things like your data, your pipeline, CI/CD, your continuous integration, your monitoring stack or evaluation stack. All of the things, the scaffold, the software, right? The thing, the interface, and so it's not a threat, right? I think when you look at it as a threat, you turn into Alan, and then you never use the thing. I use Cursor.
I tried using it.
Oh wow, we're gonna have a great conversation. We disagree all the time.
All the time.
So we may actually, depending on how this conversation goes, but I want to sort of turn it back to another question before we get into all of that.
So yeah, I have more thoughts on this, but I saw we had other hands.
I had a follow-up on his, which is what makes you so sure that your job is going to be safe? And you've sort of answered that already.
Well, but it lets me say one other thing, which is an analogy I really like. People think that the role of a software developer is to write software, to write code, and it's not. The role of the job of a software developer is to understand the customer, the client, the user, the whoever, and using code, do that.
And it's to a means.
And
Means. It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
right, yes. I've heard a lot of people say something like, these AI systems are great because the future programming language is in English. And I'm like, well, the current programming language is in English. The problem is the users, the customers, the whoever are really, really bad at speaking English. So it's been the role of the program manager, the project manager, the software developer to take this incredibly fuzzy description and turn that into the product. Now, very simplistically, we have AI systems that do that today. I don't think we're going to get them much more sophisticated because users are not going to get more sophisticated in describing the problem. That's where the problem is.
So follow-up, this goes to sort of a more general there's always been this problem of misalignment in what the model's goal is, just to carry on a conversation, period, end of story, typically, right, in these chat models, versus actually providing the truth or providing your goal, whatever it is that you're asking. It's just trying to, as I think Noble put it in his earlier session, they're sycophantic, right? They just try to please you.
So
instead of actually giving you something that's can be authoritative and explainable and all the rest of it.
So I'm going to repeat that just in case somebody else didn't hear it or we didn't pick it up on the recording. The issue is that these models they're pattern systems. All they're trying to do is generate something that sounds like the right response to what you just said. They're not. Well, I guess that's what programmers are too, in a way, isn't it?
Right.
is trying to please the client. But that's also a problem, is that on some level, we're trying to deliver a product, not just please the client. We have to do both.
And it's all how you prompt it too, right? Like, so I want to sort of just break this down into its, local minima, right? So if I were to prompt the system to say, if you don't know, say you don't know, it would be less sycophantic, right? Like it would literally, yeah, okay.
Now, I was just going to point out that you can, through few-shot training, you can essentially provide it with the knowledge that it doesn't have.
Right.
I've found quite often if I need to migrate from bot platform A to bot platform B, the model may not have been trained on both of those, but if I can provide example of here's bot A in format A, here's what it ended up in when I migrated it, and then example again, and here's one that I need to migrate. I can get like 75, 80, 85% of the way there and just accelerate my migration path.
So, brilliant point.
Summarize the point first.
So you summarize it again.
Yeah.
You've got the microphone.
Well, essentially what you're saying, and hopefully I repeat this, is that depending on how much context that you're providing the model, you're able to sort of get more reliable. Is that?
Yeah. So it essentially, I think to your point, a senior developer is really, most of the work is having experience.
Right.
And so by providing that experience as additional instruction to the model, you can imbue it with some of your experience, and essentially I've found the LLMs to be an accelerator in my work.
Right. I think the problem starts coming in, and again, the point of, as a senior developer, you're the one that's going to be providing that context. That's great while you still have senior developers.
Oh, for sure.
And when we lose senior developers because they're aging out and we're not replacing them with the junior developers because they don't exist, we're now having this knowledge gap.
Yeah.
And that means that the LLMs end up with a knowledge gap. Any other questions? This was a good,
I just want to add one point.
Sure.
There is there's some good news with the point that you just brought. A lot of these co-pilots, and you were talking about Cursor and Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and some of these assistive things, essentially do in-context learning, right? They provide some context on the environment, so the code that you might have in your repo, or the code, all the code that is open, or even within your actual code base. It's sort of including that within its context in order to sort of respond. So in essentially, again, how you prompt it matters, right? Like, so if you were to sort of take that context, add your own sort of, what you have in your README or your wiki or whatever, and sort of add that to the context, the system may be able to sort of mimic your schema, for example, and then provide you maybe 70% of the way there. But these systems aren't deterministic, right? I just want to put a fine point on that. And so we should never expect it to give us to a 100% of a high level of confidence that it's going to give us the right response consistently, underscore consistently, every time. So
yeah, no, it's a fair point. When I use LLMs for development, it will give me flawless codes sometimes, and then total sometimes.
Yeah.
and you need to, as a developer, you need to be able to tell the difference.
Right.
Because a junior developer will just copy and paste that code, and then you'll get interesting results.
Well, and we did, and look at, we have tons of problems with
Right. Well,
cut and paste code from Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
Okay, so on your point about not deterministic, and you get a different result, potentially get a different result every time with these generators, from an ethical standpoint, and I know tying into what you were saying about explainability, I believe one of your talks is about, how do you account for explainability when you know the results, and if you're talking about reliance on the co-pilots versus not having senior level developers, how, as a user or from a user perspective, I want to know, and even from regulatory perspective of right to explanation of how I got this answer, how do you account for that from an ethical standpoint?
So I'm going to take that up kick it up a level even, and that's, these models are non-deterministic, as you said. How do we start either moving to a point where we accept the fact that the answers we're getting back from our computers are non-deterministic? Or how do we make them deterministic? And how do we, as the question framed it, how do we look at this from an ethical point of view? Is it ethical? Is it right? Is it a good thing that we may have systems that we cannot necessarily trust the answers to?
Ethics. I'm struggling to understand are we still talking about the development?
I would take it one level beyond that.
Sure.
Development is a small subset.
Right.
What about everything else
Right.
that that these AI models can do?
Is it ethical? Wow. One, given that they're trained on other people's without their consent, yes, that's perhaps unethical, and maybe through legislation, probably not even, but through the public and sort of courts, we may eventually come to some sort of middle ground where however Microsoft or GitHub got to sort of create 7 permutations of sort of writing a main.py, just from scratch. Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Or yeah.
So I think, my question on this comes down to,
Sure.
okay, do I trust a generative AI model to calculate my power bill?
Probably not. It depends on what context you provided it.
Well, but here's the thing. Eventually, we start thinking out,
Right.
okay? I'm going to be using AI models to help design computers, design the chips for those computers, design the possible inputs and outputs for those chips, design the software that's running on those chips, okay? At some level, if I've got a pile of non-deterministic inputs that are now building a non-deterministic machine, and I am going to ask that machine to send me a bill for how much power I used.
And my bill is $1 million, explain.
It's like having a crazy uncle.
I'm having a very difficult time, probably having a dense moment. I just can't map that to ethics
Whoa.
right now.
Let's help you.
Well, okay, go ahead.
But maybe I'm just...
Do you think it's right that I've got a computer that is sending me a bill for something, and power or whatever, that it can explain it, at least on the surface level, but it can't explain it on how that chip added 2 and 2 and came up with 5?
Okay, I wanted to say this before, but I wanted to get a better understanding of what your question was. It's a very interesting one.
Yeah, transparent. If you look at it, ethics from the lens of transparency, accountability, and from that lens, to be able to write to explanation of how I got how that bill I'm receiving is accurate. And so, if you look at it from that,
Maybe trust is the better word.
trustworthy.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm getting it now. There are a couple angles because your angle is a little different. I think your angle, Alan, is a little goes a different direction from your, what's your name?
I think we're converging.
You're converging,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we are, yes.
One way to answer, I'm going to answer it two ways. One way to answer that is that we may be biased on how these systems are working today. You were saying think ahead, right? 2 years ago, when ChatGPT came, it would fail at simple logic type questions. We were trying to, take a step back. Google invented something called word2vec. It was the very first time that I actually saw that it was possible to do math with language. It blew my mind, vectors, right? Like,
yeah.
So I wouldn't trust it to do my homework for me last year. I wouldn't trust it to do math reliably like my calculator would. But I also have a mental model to not expect full accuracy from that. Though through some context, I'll get to your question here in a second. Through some context manipulation, I can actually have it say, for example, think step by step and verify your work, or if I'm doing something a little bit more advanced with agents, I can have a verifier come through and just do the math part, but I'm using a different kind of model and its strengths, or I might just go with a traditional conditional, a deterministic approach just to be my verifier based on the system, based on what I'm trying to do. Now, is it trustworthy? I think goes to the session that we were just having the conversation. Trustworthiness comes in when, as the AI designer, developer, I have set the right expectations of the capability of the model. I provided the right context, what the AI can do, what it cannot. I provide the context as to how the data was sourced, what the data will be used for, how long, if I were to provide my own bill, for example, if that data would be used to train other people's information, and I have the choice to opt in or opt out. I guess where I'm converging with your question as far as an answer is concerned is, it's in the hands of the designer of the AI system, the developer of the systems that that use the models, in order to, from a UX standpoint, communicate to the user that context and that use. Sorry, go ahead.
But the designer, the developer, and just about every role you just named in there is the AI.
That's not necessarily true.
Next question.
I was just going to point out that when you build a system that is agentic, when you're using the AI to determine how this bill gets put together, it's perfectly possible to, even if the output is just a bill, the step-by-step thinking can still get logged. You can instruct the model to
like a React
to output its reasoning. You may not give that to a customer, you just log it. So if a customer comes back later and says, why is my bill X? You can go back and look at, okay, when I generated John Doe's bill, according to the system logs, here's the reasoning that the
Okay, so the answer is, in some ways, we're providing additional context for some future AI system to be able to look at the past AI system. Because remember, I'm forecasting way out, saying we're pulling humans out of the loop here more and more.
And we're already doing this, where we have AI System 1 reviewing the work of AI System B, where we can have a model that generates a response to the customer, and then we have a separate AI that reviews the work of the first model to make sure that it adhered to ground truth data that was generated by a third model.
Right.
That at some point was reviewed by a human, though.
Right.
Too,
my concern on that as a developer is, okay, so we're trusting one non-deterministic system to review another non-deterministic system, and with the hope that if we keep adding enough of these, we'll eventually get a consensus between enough of them that we can have a reliable answer.
You always need a human in the loop at some point, and you need these consistent reviews.
So human in the loop seems like the answer that's getting the audience applause. Okay.
I'm actually going to disagree with that.
So I just wanted to say that accuracy is one conversation, but the original comment, ethics, all of the entities that are involved in the development of AI, many of them have self-interests.
Have
They're
what,
corporations.
self-interest?
Self-interests. So if company X is active in the development of an AI model that is used by developers, etc., let's say a bank uses it, but the bill for their services, if it were maybe just a little bit different, 0.5% different than what it should be, maybe people don't see. And this is an ethical violation, not an accuracy violation.
Okay.
And it makes the company a ton of money, and they claim it's a rounding error.
Right. Hey, you have another thought on this? I don't know how much time we have left.
We have about 4 minutes left, or 6 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to end the human in the loop thing with something provocative. Perhaps a transformer-based large language model alone isn't, you're forecasting in the future, right? Isn't what's going to be status quo for even agentic systems or multi-agentic systems in the future. Perhaps something neuro-symbolic might be where you actually add traditional rules, which is the human in the loop, because we write those rules versus a neural network sort of coming up with those, or maybe a hybrid of both.
But then you get the AI writing those rules for the neuro-symbolic network. And
Which
which is
good. I'll take a conditional check,
Right.
which is how my calculator works.
I mean, I will agree with you that I think that LLMs, I think LLMs are a dead end. I don't think that's going to be where our AI models are going in the future. I think we've learned lessons from them, and we'll use them to some capability. But I think, trying to squeeze more out of them, I think is a losing proposition.
Right. You're just adding more complexity.
Right. So I do think using
more
other
layers,
models will be the way to go in the future. Yeah.
So, to that, along those lines, to me, there's again, this goes to sort of the alignment issue, which is OpenAI, for instance, uses RLHF, right? The
Reinforcement learning with human feedback.
Reinforced learning with human feedback, just so we get that on the air.
To basically tune how it behaves. But do you see a future in which getting it wrong is heavily penalized, right? So that the goal's more aligned to being truthful. That's you're trying to instill a value in some sense to these models, or to something that replaces just the LLM alone, to say, hey, the user wants accurate information. They want to be able to trust it. They want to be able to use it and have high confidence that it's not.
I'm gonna have to edit this again. So I guess it comes down to, will we use techniques like RLHF or future ones that we may develop to build models that have trustworthiness more built into them, getting away from pure statistical language models. I think that makes sense. I mean, I think we need to see what those models will look like, but I'd certainly love to see them. You have a quick thought on that one?
No.
Okay.
I think you said it perfectly.
We're just about out of
That's the first
time. Final question from anyone? Hearing none. Okay. So again, you can, Noble, where's the best place to find you, to reach out to you later?
I'm trying to juice my YouTube viewership so I can do more educational items. So please, everyone here, before you leave, you have to subscribe to Noble Ackerson, my first and last name, on YouTube. You just type in Noble Ackerson, YouTube and Google, or
How do you spell the last name?
ACKERSON. And you'll see a series of videos where I talk about AI bias, explainability, and MLOps for some reason. Yep. Machine learning operations.
And you can find me on LinkedIn, Alan Firstenberg, the name's right there. And certainly subscribe to us on YouTube at Two Voice Devs, all one word. And these were great questions. I want to thank you very much. All of this will be turned into an episode in the upcoming weeks, we hope. And we hope to see you there on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.